15,000 men dead in 3 hours. And that's not even the most terrifying part of this story. 83 people every minute. More than one person every second. A number you need to pause for a moment to truly comprehend. This is the largest ambush in human history. And it happened in the year 217 BC. Not a few thousand soldiers lying in wait like other battles, but 50,000 men. An entire massive army hidden and ready to strike. And the victims? A complete Roman legion. An army that people once believed was invincible on the battlefield. 25,000 elite soldiers swallowed whole in one foggy morning. No one even had time to understand what was happening around them. The Roman consul was chasing an enemy he thought was fleeing in panic. He was absolutely confident of his impending victory, but he had no idea that he himself was the prey. And the one running away was actually the true hunter in this deadly game. And the one who designed this perfect trap? Not a general at the peak of his powers, as you might imagine, but a man who had lost one eye just a few weeks before, his remaining eye still red because the wound hadn't fully healed yet. The year 217 BC, Lake Trasimene, central Italy, a place about to witness a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. So who is this one-eyed man, and why did he appear here, thousands of kilometers from his homeland, to fight Rome? Hannibal Barca, born in 247 BC in the city of Carthage on the distant North African coast. Carthage at that time was the most powerful trading empire in the Mediterranean, so wealthy that it made Rome both envious and fearful. Hannibal's father was Hamilcar Barca, the greatest general Carthage ever had, a man who fought against Rome his entire life. When Hannibal was 9 years old, his father was preparing to march to Spain to expand territory and build a new army from scratch. The 9-year-old boy begged to go with his father, and Hamilcar agreed, but with one condition that had to be fulfilled first. Before the altar of Carthaginian gods, with flames flickering, Hamilcar made his son kneel down and swear a solemn oath. The 9-year-old boy placed his hand over the fire and swore that all his life he would be Rome's enemy, using fire and steel against them. The oath of a child. But Hannibal kept that oath until his very last breath, more than 40 years later. Hamilcar died on the battlefield when Hannibal was 18. Then his brother-in-law also died, and the burden fell onto his shoulders. At 25, Hannibal became the supreme commander of Carthaginian forces in Spain, the youngest in history to hold such a position. He spent the next 7 years expanding territory, building his army, and waiting for the opportunity to fulfill his childhood oath. In 218 BC, the opportunity came when Rome declared war on Carthage over a dispute about the city of Saguntum. Hannibal made a decision that no one could have predicted. A decision that would astonish the entire ancient world completely. Instead of going by sea as everyone expected, he would lead his army on foot, across the Pyrenees, through Gaul, and over the Alps. 2,000 kilometers marching through hostile territories to then descend into the very homeland of his enemy, Rome itself. 50,000 infantry, 9,000 cavalry, 37 massive war elephants from Africa, animals the Italians had never seen before. The enormous army began the longest march in ancient military history, crossing half of Europe to attack Rome on its own soil. In October of 218 BC, the army began climbing the Alps, Europe's highest mountain range with snow-capped peaks year-round. The trails were so narrow that only one person could pass at a time, one side a sheer cliff, the other a drop of thousands of meters. War elephants, animals from the hot and humid tropics, trembled in the bone-cutting cold of the high European mountains around them. Mountain tribes ambushed them constantly, soldiers fell into chasms, horses lost their footing, supplies dwindled with each passing day. 16 days crossing the mountains. 16 days of hell at high altitude. And when they descended into the Italian plains, Hannibal counted his forces. 50,000 infantry, now only 20,000. 9,000 cavalry, now only 6,000. He had lost more than half his entire army. What about the 37 war elephants? Most had died from the cold in the mountains, only a few survived, and they wouldn't live long either. But Hannibal had something that Rome never expected, something that would help him compensate for everything lost on the freezing Alps. The Gallic tribes of northern Italy hated Rome to their very bones. They had been oppressed by Rome for generations and wanted revenge. When they heard someone was leading an army against Rome, they came by thousands, tens of thousands, bringing all their hatred with them. The army swelled again, more than 50,000 men, and this time many of them were ready to die just to see Rome fall. In December of 218 BC, on the frozen banks of the Trebia River, Hannibal first faced a Roman legion directly in battle. He lured the Romans to wade across the river on a winter morning. Water, cold to the bone, then surrounded and completely crushed them. 25,000 Roman soldiers killed or captured at Trebia, a disaster that Rome had not experienced in many generations before. In the spring of 217 BC, Hannibal needed to advance deeper into Roman territory, but they had learned their painful lesson. The 2 Roman consuls stationed their armies, blocking both main roads leading south. They thought that would be enough to keep them safe. But Hannibal chose a road that no one dared to take, a road that even locals avoided, let alone an entire army with supplies. The marshes of the Arno River, a vast flooded land where spring snowmelt raised the water to chest height on a grown man. 4 days, 3 nights, without stopping. 50,000 men wading through dirty water, thick mud clinging to their feet with every single step. Exhausted soldiers lay on the corpses of dead horses to catch a few minutes of sleep, because there was nowhere dry to rest their backs. Horses lost their hooves from being submerged too long. Thousands died from disease and exhaustion, the army deteriorating with each passing day. And Hannibal, the general commanding this entire army, his eye began to swell red and inflamed from infection caused by the dirty water. There was no time to stop for treatment, no medicine or medical conditions available. The infection spread and ravaged his eye completely. When he emerged from the marshes, Hannibal Barca, Carthage's genius general, could only see the world through one remaining eye. But even in his most painful moment, with one eye going blind, his mind was sharper than ever to see the opportunity before him. He looked at the map of the land ahead, saw Lake Trasimene nestled among the hills, and smiled because he had found the perfect trap. But even the most perfect trap is useless without someone willing to walk into it, and that person was on his way to meet Hannibal. Gaius Flaminius, consul of the Roman Republic, one of the 2 most powerful men in the empire at that particular moment in time. But he wasn't a nobleman born in silk and luxury. He was a man of the people, called popularis in Latin by his supporters. That meant the Roman aristocracy hated him. They saw him as a traitor to his class, a threat to the established order of society. In 232 BC, Flaminius did something that drove the Senate mad with fury. He distributed land to the poor citizens. Public land belonging to the state was divided among farmers who had nothing, a revolutionary law that the aristocracy could never accept. But the common people loved him. They elected him consul for the first time in 223, despite Senate opposition. He also built the Via Flaminia, the great road from Rome to Ariminum, a road that still exists in Italy 2,000 years later today. In 223, he led an army that defeated the Gauls in the north, a glorious victory that made him even more famous. Among the Gauls he massacred was the Insubres tribe, people who would never forget this grudge they held against Flaminius forever. Flaminius was talented, no one could deny that, but he had a fatal weakness that he himself never recognized or acknowledged: arrogance and impatience. He believed in himself so much that he wouldn't bother listening to anyone, even when they were completely right. In 217 BC, after the Trebia disaster, Rome elected Flaminius consul for the second time to deal with Hannibal's threat. But Flaminius did something that shocked all of Rome. He didn't bother returning to Rome for the inauguration ceremony as tradition required. He took office right at Ariminum in the north, completely skipping all the religious rituals that Romans considered most sacred and essential. For Romans of that era, this was an absolute taboo, an insult to the gods, an invitation for disaster to descend upon one's head. The Senate sent letters recalling him to Rome to perform the proper ceremonies. Flaminius received them, read them, then threw them away and ignored. According to the historian Livy, when preparing to march, Flaminius's horse suddenly threw him to the ground, an obvious bad omen everyone saw. The legion's standard got stuck in the ground and couldn't be pulled up, as if the gods themselves were preventing this army from advancing forward. Flaminius laughed loudly in front of the worried priests. He said he didn't believe in superstition, then ordered the army to march immediately. When Hannibal suddenly appeared behind him, burning and pillaging the fertile Etruria region, Flaminius immediately gave chase without any hesitation. Not waiting for the other consul's legion to join forces, no reconnaissance, not asking anyone's advice, he was confident he would win this time. He saw smoke on the horizon, traces of an enemy fleeing in panic, and he was certain he would catch them before nightfall came. But Hannibal wasn't fleeing. He was luring. Step by step, he drew Flaminius closer and closer to the trap that was already set and waiting. On June 20th, in the year 217 BC, the Roman army camped near the shore of Lake Trasimene, resting for the next day. That night, thick fog began rising from the lake's surface, covering the entire valley in a white veil through which nothing could be seen. While Flaminius slept soundly in his tent, Hannibal stayed awake all night, his remaining eye gleaming in the dim torchlight around him. He ordered 50,000 soldiers to move in darkness, in absolute silence, not a single sound permitted to be made by anyone at all. The terrain of Lake Trasimene was as if created for laying a trap. Nature had prepared a perfect death for anyone who entered this valley. The main road ran along the north shore of the lake, so narrow that only a few people could walk abreast. Water on one side, hills on the other. The hills were covered with dense trees, perfectly concealing any line of sight. An entire army could hide, and those below would never know at all. Hannibal placed his veteran Spanish and African troops at the end of the valley, where the Romans would see them first when they arrived. This was the bait. When the Romans saw the enemy ahead, they would rush to attack and completely forget about what surrounded them on all sides. The Gauls, with their seething hatred, were positioned on the southern hillsides. They would attack the Roman flank when the signal was finally given. The elite Numidian cavalry, the best horsemen in the ancient world, were placed at the western entrance to the narrow valley passageway. Their task was simple but brutal: seal the trap shut when all the Romans were inside, not letting a single soul escape to the outside world. 50,000 men. Absolute silence. Lying in wait through the dark night, waiting for the sun to rise and the prey to walk into the tiger's mouth. When the first light of dawn shone down, the fog still hung thick over the valley. Impossible to see more than 10 paces in any direction. Hannibal smiled. These were the most perfect conditions he could have wished for. Nature itself was on Carthage's side this morning, it seemed. In the Roman camp, Flaminius woke and ordered the army to march immediately. He wanted to catch the fleeing enemy before they could escape him. Still no reconnaissance. Still not sending scouts ahead to check the road. He was completely confident that victory was within his grasp today. 25,000 Roman soldiers began marching into the thick white fog, their formation stretching for kilometers along the narrow, winding road. They couldn't see anything beyond a few steps ahead, couldn't see the hillsides on either side, couldn't see 50,000 pairs of eyes watching from above. The sound of marching feet echoed through the fog, armor clanking together, horses neighing, the sounds of an army marching toward its own death. The Roman vanguard reached the end of the valley and encountered the Carthaginian troops waiting there. The sounds of battle began to ring out loudly. Flaminius was pleased when he heard the news. Finally, he had caught the fleeing enemy. And now he would destroy them completely, once and for all. He didn't know that was only the bait. That the army ahead was only meant to hold him long enough for the trap to snap shut around him. All 25,000 Roman troops had now fully entered the valley. Their formation stretched thin like a thread along the entire narrow road. And that was when Hannibal raised his hand, giving the signal that 50,000 men had waited for all night long in absolute perfect silence. The sound of war horns tore through the quiet fog, and then the whole valley seemed to explode as 50,000 men poured down from three sides. The Gauls charged down from the hillsides like a flood, screaming cries of hatred that had been suppressed for so many years under Rome's yoke. The Numidian cavalry galloped to seal the valley entrance behind, blocking all retreat routes, turning the road into a sealed bag of certain death. In the thick fog, the Roman soldiers couldn't see where the enemy was coming from. They only heard screaming, then suddenly got cut down from behind. They couldn't form battle lines, couldn't see well enough to coordinate, couldn't hear commands, because the screaming drowned out absolutely everything else. The Roman legion, famous for its iron discipline, fell apart in moments, becoming a panicked mob being squeezed and slaughtered from every single side. According to the historian Livy, the battle was so brutal that something strange happened that no one noticed until everything was completely over. An earthquake. An actual earthquake occurred right in the middle of the battle, shaking the entire land around the lake with tremendous force. But no one noticed. The sounds of killing, the screaming, the clashing of metal drowned out even the sound of the earth itself trembling beneath them. The panicking Roman soldiers ran toward the only open space left, the glittering lake surface behind them, thinking water would save them from hell. Many waded into the water, going deeper and deeper, water up to their chests, then to their necks, thinking if they swam far enough they'd escape. But Roman armor weighed more than 20 kilograms. It dragged them down slowly while they struggled desperately on the surface of the cold water. Others got their feet trapped in the soft mud at the bottom of the shallow lake. They couldn't move, just standing there waiting to die like targets. And then Carthaginian cavalry swam their horses out, swinging swords to cut off heads one by one as they came up above the water to breathe. None escaped. The surface of Lake Trasimene turned red with blood that morning, a red colour that local people said could still be seen many days afterward. In the middle of the chaos and death, Flaminius was still alive and fighting. He tried to rally his troops, but it was already far too late. The historian Livy recorded that he fought bravely until the very end, never running away, even though he knew everything was already completely over. But a Gallic horseman had recognized him among the crowd, a horseman who had his own personal reason to search for this particular Roman consul. Ducarius, a warrior of the Insubres tribe, the people that Flaminius had massacred 6 years earlier during his northern military campaign. He had lost his family, lost his people, lost everything at the hands of this consul, and now he had finally found his enemy at last. Ducarius rode his horse through the chaotic crowd, shouting loudly words that those around him would never be able to forget for the rest of their lives. "This is the man who devastated our lands and our cities," he screamed in Gallic, then charged straight at Flaminius with his spear aimed to kill. The Roman consul fell. The man who thought he was the hunter now died at the hands of the one he had once hunted so mercilessly before. 3 hours. That was all the time needed to completely destroy a Roman legion that had once been considered absolutely invincible on any battlefield. 15,000 Roman soldiers died on the spot, their bodies lying scattered throughout the valley and floating on the blood-soaked lake's surface. 6,000 more were captured as prisoners. Hannibal would release Rome's allies and keep only the actual Roman citizens as his valuable captives. 6,000 men in the vanguard had fought through the encirclement and escaped. They thought they were at least luckier than their fallen comrades. But Mahabal, Hannibal's cavalry commander, chased them with his fastest Numidian horsemen, capturing every single one of them that very same day. All 25,000 Roman soldiers, not a single one escaped, all either dead or captured within the span of one single foggy morning. News of the disaster reached Rome like a tsunami, faster than anyone could mentally prepare themselves to receive such devastating information. An official stood before the crowded Roman forum. He spoke just one short sentence in a trembling voice that echoed across the silent crowd. "We have lost a great battle." No explanation, no details, just those 6 words were enough to plunge the entire city into complete panic and chaos. Women poured into the streets, searching for news about husbands, sons, and fathers. stopping anyone returning from the north to ask about their loved ones. This was the greatest disaster in Roman history up to that point, greater than any defeat they had ever had to endure in all their years. The Senate did something they hadn't done in 36 years. They appointed a dictator with absolute power to save the Republic from destruction. Quintus Fabius Maximus, 58 years old, a man old before his time, but who understood what Flaminius had never been able to comprehend at all. Hannibal could not be defeated by confronting him directly. He was too skilled, his soldiers too battle-hardened for that kind of straightforward approach. The only way was to let him exhaust himself, avoid major battles, cut his supply lines, wait until he had nothing left to fight with anymore. Fabius followed Hannibal like a shadow, harassing foraging parties, but absolutely never engaging in any large-scale battle, no matter the provocation offered. The Roman public was furious with this strategy. They called him Cunctator, the Delayer, a nickname full of contempt and deep, humiliating insult. They demanded a braver general, someone who would dare to face Hannibal and destroy him, instead of running away like a coward avoiding his duty. The Senate yielded to public opinion, replacing Fabius with younger, braver commanders, men who would teach Hannibal a proper military lesson finally. On August 2nd in the year 216 BC, at Cannae in southern Italy, 86,000 Roman troops faced Hannibal in open battle. This was the largest army Rome had ever assembled. They were certain that with such overwhelming numbers, there was no possible way they could lose. The result? 70,000 Romans dead in a single day, nearly 5 times the Trasimene disaster, greater than anything anyone could have ever imagined. After Cannae, Rome finally understood the bitter truth. Fabius had been right from the very beginning, and they had been wrong not to listen to him. Cunctator, once a nickname of insult and shame, now became the highest title of honor, and Fabius was called the Shield of Rome by all. His strategy saved the entire Republic. Rome eventually defeated Hannibal not through battle, but through patience and the slow grinding of time itself. 2,000 years later, the Fabian strategy is still taught in every military academy in the world as a lesson in tactical wisdom and restraint. As for Hannibal, after the victory, he searched for Flaminius's body to bury it with proper rites, as a warrior worthy of respect deserved. But he never found it. The consul's body had disappeared in the chaos, perhaps beheaded, and impossible to identify among all the other dead. Lake Trasimene is still there today, lying peacefully among the green rolling hills of Umbria in Italy, beautiful enough to move the soul. Tourists come here to swim, fish, and watch sunsets, few knowing that 2,000 years ago this water's surface was once stained red with blood. Trasimene left behind a lesson that history never stops repeating, a lesson about the price of arrogance and the value of patience in all things. The arrogant always think they are the hunter, until they discover that they were just the prey walking straight into the tiger's waiting mouth.